Welcome to Tyromper's No Limit Podcast.
Thank you guys so much for joining Tyromper's No Limit Podcast, episode number 20. For this one, guys, we are very pumped up. We are very honored to have a man that is the ultimate comeback story today that I think is going to inspire us a lot. This is a man that spent 5 years in a federal prison, but has since reemerged as an awesome family man, leader, and a champion. He now inspires other people to live better lives. This is a man that shows you your comeback can always be greater than your setback. This is a man that I'm really honored to call my brother and my friend. Welcome to the podcast, Brad, aka Age Survivor. Thanks for hopping on, brother.
That's a lot of excitement for someone just like me, but I appreciate it. I'll re-listen to that over and over again and remind myself how good I am.
I better call my guests say that. They're like, I'm gonna play this back every morning when I want to hit that snooze button. I'm gonna fire myself up. You know me, man. I gotta live with energy.
That's the way to do it. I mean, that's the way to do it. I know you live in a warm climate, and I always feel envious when I see your pictures. I was out fixing my work van this morning. It was 8 degrees, and I thought, I'm going to come back inside and talk to this man who hangs around with no shirt on in a warm climate. No wonder you're in such a good mood.
I tell you, man, we moved from Illinois a little over 2 years ago now, and that was the number one reason, was to escape the cold. We're going through these winters, and we're like, you know what? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Let's just move across. We got 350 days of sunshine now, so it's pretty nice. But again, thanks for coming. Yeah, well, hey, Vegas, you know what? Even in our neighborhood, brother, come hang out, man. We'll do some walks and hikes together, man. We're expanding.
I could use a few more walks and a few more hikes, I'll tell you.
We all can, man. Well, for anybody who might not know you, Brad, you're really popular on Twitter and growing across all social media now, and I'm honored to have you on, man. But could you give people maybe just a 2-3 minute introduction about yourself?
Sure. I'm 45 years old. I'm married with 4 children. My sons are adults. They were 18 and 20. When I say adults, I use that term lightly. You know, they're 18 and 20, so they are adults technically, but they're still boneheads a little bit. And I've got 2 daughters that are 16 and 12. And I've been married for 22 years. And, I went through life. I had a really good life. Great family, great parents, great upbringing. Got into business, into life, got into some trouble, got sideways with the feds, went down that road, got indicted, went through a terrible experience, went to prison, went through all that, made it through, got out, kept my family, started a few businesses, sort of successful, sort of failure, whatever. I landed on Twitter a couple of years ago during the COVID lockdown because I didn't have anything else to do. April of 2020, I was like, well, hell, whatever. And so it started to grow, and I don't grow very fast, but it's been very cathartic for me to write whatever I feel or say whatever I feel. And surprisingly to me, maybe it shouldn't have been, but lots of people relate to some of my feelings. And I get lots and lots of messages from people saying, gosh, I feel just like that, or I've been through that, or how would you handle this situation or whatever. So it's it's been a real blessing to find this community. The 9 to 5, I've got a couple of businesses. It's a grind. It's hard. There's a struggle. This is kind of my release. I love to check Twitter and respond to people and write stuff. And in this case, have a conversation with you. But my name is Brad. I go by the Age Survivor online, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, man. A lot to unpack. And just before we get going, I'll link everything that Brad does below too, so other people can follow and check you out too, man, because you're a man that definitely inspires me. I can see why you inspire a lot of people and get a lot of messages too. I mean, I think everybody in our life has sort of setbacks, right? When I look at my life, I divorced, and it was one of the harder things I went through, and some alcoholism and some addictions and things like that. And when people can kind of lean into those and then grow through them and come out stronger the other side, that inspires people. So can you kind of take us through sort of, some of the hardships that you did have to go through and how you grew through them, I guess?
Yeah, you cut out there a little at the end, but I think you asked me about hardships, going through my incarceration and coming out and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
First of all, let me say this. The reason that I love doing this is, even though my experience sounds extreme because I did federal time. It wasn't pleasant. It was a bad experience. There were hardships and challenges. I went through crisis of faith. I went through self-hatred, self-loathing, suicidal thoughts. I went through all of those things that many people experience that go through divorce and alcoholism and pornography addiction and all the different things people deal with. So while my experience sounds extreme, and it probably is, the 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 way back, I guess I should say, is exactly the same for someone who just has a bad relationship, or even someone who just can't get in shape. I mean, the basics of success in life are the same no matter how extreme your situation is. The other interesting thing about that is when you're going through it, and you probably experienced this during your divorce, when you're going through your thing, it's the biggest thing in the world. And you can't imagine anyone else suffering as bad as you're suffering right at that moment.
So
And
true.
I've learned that there's always someone that's in deeper shit than you are. Always. You know what I mean? And so, first, I'll say that first and foremost. While my experience is extreme and draws a lot of eyes on Twitter because not that many people go in and come out and talk about it, um, but my experiences are the same as yours and everybody else's. When we're going through whatever we go through, trying to be good people, good fathers, good husbands, whatever. Um, I would say the most challenging experience, the most challenging thing about being incarcerated, of course, was being away from my family. There's no question. I could have taken a million daily beatings, and that would have meant nothing to me in comparison to the pain of hanging up that phone every other night when I got to call home for 15 minutes and listening to my children grow up without me. Hearing my wife despair because finances were really tough and they might lose the house, and my son's having this problem, and my other son needs a father at home, and my daughter's having this problem. Baptisms and birthdays and Christmas Eves and Christmas days, those experiences where you would go back to your room or your cell and you would sit down on the bunk or lay down, and it was, the despair was unimaginable for me to explain. And that part never ever got better. So let me make that clear. Even though I learned to be fairly happy inside, and I was happy most of my time, the despair of missing my family never got easier to the last day I was there. The pain was unbearable. The self recrimination, guilt, self hatred. I mean, I'll even say it, just absolute self hatred was so real and so overpowering that for many people it became too much. Suicides are rampant on the inside. And frankly, since people get out, a lot of my friends that I made in there haven't done well since they got out. A lot of them have committed suicide also. So that was the worst part. That was by
What
far the worst part.
what do you think separates someone who was maybe in that same situation that you were, and they kind of let that, they went a different path even when they may have gotten out, and sadly that was their outcome, compared to how you were able to kind of shift that around and get to where you're at now with loving family around you and successful business, your marriage is thriving and all these things, right?
Yeah. I would say two things. One is in my control. The other one's just a little lucky. The first one is I had a good support system at home. I had a couple of friends that stayed super loyal and true. They emailed me, they sent me letters, they looked out for my kids, they went to the boys' ball games and emailed me about the games. My family, I have 5 siblings. I'm the oldest of 6, and all of my siblings minus one were very, very supportive and involved with my family. And then, of course, my wife and children. My wife did something interesting. She basically pretended like I was on a trip almost. Uh, Never discussed divorce, never discussed separating the family. So my children never got the impression that we were a fractured family. We were separated, and they have pain and suffering because of that separation, as we all did. But they never had that fractured feeling that comes from a real extended a death or a real separation. So the support system was a big deal for me. A lot of these guys didn't have that. Either they came from bad backgrounds, which most of them did, or their family dumped them, when they went inside and got into trouble. And they had nothing, truthfully, nothing left to live for, at least in their own minds. So the first part is I have survived and I'm mostly normal now because of the support system is a big deal. The second thing was, and this was all under my control, but it was a real challenge. And that's what I talk about all the time. And it was honesty with myself about myself. So I've been on 3 or 4 podcasts, and I talk about this every time, because to me, this is the number one function to making real change in life. It isn't faith, it isn't humility, it isn't the things we normally say, all those things are part of it. It's about being super, super honest with yourself. And so when you go back to your bunk after talking to your family or having a bad experience on the yard or whatever, and you lay there and you've got, 14 hours of darkness or whatever it is you've got, it's wintertime, it's dark at the 4:30 count, it's devastating, and you're in there and you're depressed anyway because of the weather. And I was in Colorado, it's cold, and the life's horrible. And you lay there and you start to go through all your life, all your mistakes, your sins, if you will, whatever you want to call them. And that's painful. And so people do a couple of things. They either pretend those things don't exist, and so become disconnected with reality and eventually lose they go crazy because they disconnect from themselves. Or worse, they totally lie to themselves and make excuses for all of those mistakes, which we've all done. But one night, can't tell you when, I was probably a year in, it's like all of a sudden it dawned on me that I had to look at myself for real and start to be serious about change, but it had to start at the beginning. So I took a piece of paper, a yellow notepad, and I wrote all the time. And I wrote a list of the stuff I hated about myself.
Wow.
It was terrible. It took days. It was a very long list. It was a bad experience from the standpoint of there was a lot of things that I realized that all my life I had character deficiencies and flaws and weaknesses. And a lot of those things led me to get into the trouble that I got into. And so there was something about that. There was a liberating thing almost about seeing myself for the first time in my life as I really was. Maybe someone of faith might say as God sees you, almost like you're laid bare.
Yeah, you're not pretending anymore, right? You're going to get real and raw. Yeah, that's a powerful exercise.
The cool thing about it is the second half of the exercise is then you feel comfortable writing another list of things you like about yourself. And that's also a different exercise, because we're told, you don't be too prideful and you don't boastful or whatever. But when you're being super honest with yourself, you're going to find some things about your own character that you do like, things that you are good at, things that you'd like to improve. And so pretty soon I had, these 2 lists, and the negative one was much longer than the other, but it gave me a starting point to begin at. And so here I am years later. I've been home, I don't know, I got out in 2015. And so I've been home for, longer than I was in. And I still have those lists. I still make those lists. There are things on that list that I still haven't fixed and maybe never will. Maybe those are the things that God's going to have to fix for me when I kick the bucket and go to the other side, or whatever works. I don't know how that happens. I wish someone would tell me, by the way. Just a quick aside. My dad died 18 years ago, and it was kind of a sad thing. We expected it, but he was young, and I'm in the hospital in the emergency room, and he's died, and they've stopped working on him, and they kind of cleaned him up, and they put the sheet up to his neck, and for some reason it was just me for like 2 minutes, nobody else in the room. And I had the most overwhelming desire to know what he was doing. He never told me. He didn't tell me. So anyway,
that's $1 question right there, right? If we could solve that one, you'd probably solve a lot of stuff, right? Where do we go? Do we go instantly to this?
Oh my gosh, it was the most overwhelming thing. It's like I could almost glimpse him, because he certainly wasn't laying there on the table. That didn't look like my dad anymore. It was just like, what the hell? And so for years I would think to myself, come on, Dad, can you not just come back and say something to me, or give me a little bit of a heads up on how things are going? So
anyway. A little bit on how it's going.
Yeah, that's totally off the subject. But anyway, the 2 things that helped me come back, and let me say that the challenge is still real every day. So recently, my local business, I have a small car dealership that I started. COVID basically wiped me out, left me with some debts, which I'm trying to fix. That's stressful, super stressful. And I start to get mad and I start to get bitter. And if it hadn't happened like this, and if it hadn't happened like this, and if I hadn't done that, and if I'd have just stayed out of trouble, and you start to go through those bitternesses and those feelings again, and you start to feel stressed. And you know that even though my life is really good today, there are still times when stuff that's seemingly, it's really small compared to what I've been through, I'll think about suicide or, something extreme like that, because it's our minds. I don't know what it is about that. I don't know why we do that. And so when I say that I kind of came through it and came out the other side, what I mean is I'm still coming out the other side. I don't think we ever get through anything. I think it's a daily grind. And so when I write things like on Twitter, like, well, you do this and your life's going to be better and it's going to be great, it doesn't really mean that. That's true when you step back in the grand scheme of things, but it doesn't change the fact that you got to pay the mortgage tomorrow. You got to go out and work in the 8-degree temperatures. You got to deal with your son who got into trouble. You got to have a fight with your wife, whatever. Maybe, whatever. I mean, life is really hard. And
I think a couple of things from that. I think, a lot of people will see this like, especially myself, for, 4 years ago, the difference between now and then was, I always talk about I had a have to attitude back then versus a get to attitude. Now, that doesn't mean I still don't face challenges, right? I just try and look at the opportunity in everything and how to grow through it. And I hear this a lot with myself. Well, you're in the clouds because you're so positive and things like that. And it's like, dude, I face challenges today. Right now, 2 nights ago, I was on about 2 hours of sleep because I have a sick son. He's 18 months. That's a hard thing to deal with, man. And then when you're tired, of course, you're more stressed and agitated and things like that. And so, life still presents challenges no matter where you're at, whatever you've overcome. And I think that's a good message for people to understand that, hey, even though you might not face, Brad, the same kinds of actual survival things that you might have faced in prison or in the yard, and you've come a really long way, it's a never-ending journey, right? And it's just
it is
trying to do the best we can and get better every day. And I think that's such a crucial message that we're never arrived. We're never there. Like
No.
even when people ask me for coaching, whatnot, the first thing that I always tell them is, I'm a work in progress. Let's get better together. Every day I'm trying to wake up and just get a little bit better than I was the other day about maybe losing my temper, being a better husband, being a better dad, all these things. But I'm never going to get to a point where I say, oh man, I made it. I can just stop now. Because the minute I do that is the minute I will crash and burn, right?
But isn't that awesome though? That's I call that the process of perfection. My dad used to talk about it. It's the process of perfection. We can never, I don't know everything about the next life and God and all the things in eternity, but I do know that this life seems pretty short to me. I kind of feel like we're on this process of perfection that maybe started before we were born and maybe we'll keep going. I don't really know how all that works, but it's an everyday struggle. And if you were to wake up one morning and go, oh, I made it, I've arrived. Where the hell would you have arrived? What have you done? I don't even know what that means. The cool thing is when you make small incremental improvements, you feel good about yourself, even if it's like inconsequential. So I'm 40 pounds overweight right now. I've lost 5 pounds in the last 2 weeks. Okay, nice. Great. It's not that big of a deal. I still look just as fat as I did 2 weeks ago. I'm no different. My wife laughs. I'll stand there in the mirror. I get out of the shower and I'm like, what the, I look the same. What's the deal? But I've cleaned up my diet a little bit. I'm exercising a little harder, feeling a little bit better, lost a little bit of my giant face, whatever. Those small incremental improvements make you happy. They make you happy. So,
and they give you that momentum, I think, to keep going too. When people often say, well, I feel stuck and I don't know where to go, I always say, chug a glass of water, take a 10-minute walk, write 5 things you're grateful for. Then all of a sudden it reprograms your brain to start looking for these more opportunities and these ways to kind of have a better day and to get better and to keep improving, right? I think often we buy the lie that we're just stuck.
Yeah, we do. We do buy that lie because life's good at telling us that. Life's super hard. I mean, and these electronic devices are killing us. They're killing us. And I'm tied to it both for my business and for Twitter and whatever else. And I have a watch that tells me what my heart rate is, my respiration rate is, and how much I slept and all that stuff. But they're killing us from the standpoint of there's very little mindful time. There's very little opportunity to do what you said, reset, close everything down, kind of get free of all the noise that's always telling us that we're stuck. You're stuck. This is the way you are, whatever. It's hard. I don't envy the next generation.
I'm with you on that. And actually, my wife and I made a big point to have certain hours of the day where we're just at the park with our kids. There's no phones.
Yep.
If her and I are on a date, there's no phones. And I want to raise my kids that way too, because I do think it's important as, our phones are awesome, man. I can run a business from it. You can too.
Totally.
That's a really great thing, but we need to be mindful of that and take time out. I'll even allude back to what you said about, was it the first time you journaled in prison when you wrote down that list? Was that kind of the first?
No, not the first time. I had journaled steadily, just as a way, as an outlet. I'd grown up journaling. My dad was a writer. I'd always written just because I was told to by my father. But so I wrote because I didn't have anybody else to talk to. I lived with a guy who hated me, and well, he didn't. Depending on which personality he was having that day, he hated me. Sometimes he did, but we went days and didn't talk, and so I would write just as a way. But that particular time was, that was a life-changing event.
Yeah, and I think anybody who feels stuck, that's why I enjoy Twitter too in our community. I think because you can it's a brain dump sometimes. Like my tweets, I don't plan them. I plan usually one tweet a day, and the rest, whatever I'm thinking, I put out there. Whatever I want to talk about, I just get to put out there. It's very cathartic, and I'm a big fan of that. And I think anybody listening, start journaling. People are intimidated by that term journaling. All that means you just, you can write down what your goals are for the week, what they are for the day, what you'd like to accomplish here or there, what you don't like about yourself and would like to improve. Journal what steps it takes to get there. I mean, you can start small with these things and improve on them, right?
You can just write a daily log just to start. That's not scary.
Right.
Today I went to work and I did this thing, and then I did that thing, and I did this thing. And a few days after that, you might write at the bottom, and I was really crappy at XYZ, or I did something really good today. So it just is a process. It just is a process. You have to get used to it. And I don't care if you chuck it. All those journals I had written in my first year of my incarceration were very dark. There was stuff in there I never, ever want anyone to know about. I was vengeful against partners, against judges, and the people that I had dealt with that I felt like were all terrible and whatever else. And I was vindictive and planning bad things. I wrote all that down. And so I threw all that away. Sometimes I would be interested to look at it again. So you don't have to keep it, but there's something wonderful at the end of the day to write down, this is what I did. I'll say one other thing about journaling, and you will probably agree with this. I'm not very good at it. My wife is great. She doesn't journal, but that's how she prays. So my wife will kneel down next to our bed every night before bed, and I've asked her, what in the world are you saying for so long, because she'll stay there forever. That's what she does. She discusses her day with God, and then tells him the things she did well and the things she'd like to do better. And it's like, man, that is awesome. That's her way of, yeah, it's really cool. And I struggle with that just a little bit, probably because I'm prideful and I want to do it myself or whatever. But that's a neat way of doing things.
That's really awesome. A couple of takeaways from that. I think number one, how you talked, even where you got out some of those, you mentioned I got out some of those vengeful things, some of those things. I think maybe if you'd never journaled those, you wouldn't have got them out, because I've journaled some of the terrible things about myself, things I want to improve, things I'm not good at, and that I ultimately thank God for helping me move the needle, even if it's a little bit, right?
Sure.
But if you never do that, and again, we can even tie that back to the electronic devices. We're all so busy now. We're busy working, and we're busy being entertained, and we're busy doing these things. And just by taking 5-10 minutes a day to talk to God and tell him what you did well, what you'd like to improve on, or journaling that out, boy, it almost resets us the same way that it, if your computer's not running fast or your phone, what do? You turn it off and you let it rest a little bit. Kind of journaling and meditating, praying is just a way to kind of turn our brains off and kind of get that out, right? And then we can kind of move forward a better version of ourselves after that. I think there's a lot of power behind it.
I think you're right. I try with my children hard to teach them that, but it's hard. They're so addicted. I mean, they're worse than we are, and we're bad. But it's a real challenge. I'll tell you the other thing that another step that was really helpful to me and helps me now, and I try to teach my children also, is routine is critical. Routine is critical. When I first got locked up, all the old dogs that have done a lot of time, you'd say to them, well, how am I going to survive this? If you get them to talk to you, how am I going to do it? I got all these years and I got this family and my life's upside down. What do I do? And all they ever talked about was get a routine, build a routine, stick to it, and the days will just start to go by. And boy, was that the truth. And the routine was mostly told us to us, you had to get up at this time, and this is when the chow hall was open, and this is when you had to go do this job, and this is when you had time to work out, and this is when you had to be back for count and whatever else. But it was the monotonous routine that took away some of the thinking about how shitty my life was at the time that made a gigantic difference. And the same is true now. So I got to get up at this time. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to, read. I'm going to journal and whatever. Then I'm going to eat breakfast, and I'm going to go to work, come home, and I'm going to schedule time to stop and put everything away and think. Schedule time to come to my bedroom and talk with my wife our kids aren't allowed in there. We have time every night where no one can come in, and it's just her and I, and we can talk about the day, plan for the week, whatever we need to do. But routine is critical. If you're feeling like you're super depressed or stuck or can't get ahead in your life, I promise you don't have a steady routine. You're scrambling.
Bingo. Yeah, I always say, show me a person's daily routine and their daily habits, and I can show you their future, right? And it's, to me, I call it stacking wins, just a little different way. But I'm like you. Before I go to bed every night, actually, I outline my next day. So
Right.
I'll actually write down, hey, I'm up at 6. My morning routine is going to take me 10 minutes. I'm at the gym by 6:20. I'm lifting shoulders. Then I come home and drink my shake. Then I got my family time. Then I go on a walk. Whatever that is, I'm scheduling out my day just to, like you said. So the day's not running me, I'm running it. And so it's a big flip of that mindset right there, right?
It's interesting that the progressive world, and I don't want to get too political, but the progressive world wants to say that lifestyle that you just described, or the one I'm living, is oppressive. You know what I mean? Oh,
Right.
what a terrible thing. And you got to punch the clock, you got to do the thing, or whatever else. And it's so bad. But what people don't know is that it's the routine which frees your mind to be creative and to love and to be kind. That's where real happiness lies, is when you get rid of the worry of, your daily stuff, because it's all set. It's set in stone.
Right.
So
I look at it the same way we would do with our kids, right? I have young kids. Like, I don't tell my daughter, hey, what do you want to do today? How do you want to fill your 14 hours that you're awake or whatever? Like, dude, we have things set for them to do. That's on purpose, right? It's so that she doesn't feel overwhelmed, anxious, lost. I mean, you want to know why there's so much anxiety? There it is. People are always plugged into their phones and everything, and they don't have any plan. And they're just constantly taking in all this information, feeling overwhelmed by it without a plan. It's overwhelming. It is.
it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, can I talk a little bit, Brad, about your wife and you guys' relationship, because it's so neat.
Sure.
And I mean, I love the way you talk about her. It's very clear that she's a better person than I am. She's a saint. All these things. But for her to stick by you like that, and to never kind of talk bad about your kids, to your kids about you and things like that. What did that mean to you? And can you talk about your relationship before and how you guys are together now and kind of such a team through all this stuff?
So I wrote a tweet months ago about, and I had known my wife since we were about 12 years old. We'd never dated, weren't friends, but we went to the same schools. I knew her, she knew me, whatever, but never close. For some reason, when we went out the first time, my cousin worked with her up at the college, and she'd been in a relationship and she broke up and whatever. And so he says, hey, why don't you call her and go out? Sure, I did, whatever. It was so long ago, I called the landline. I looked up her name in the phone book, her dad's name in the phone book, and called the landline. I still remember the number.
That's awesome.
So we go on a date, and I had what I consider to be revelation, inspiration. That is a born mother and a born someone who's going to carry you through your life, because you're probably going to screw it up. It wasn't just like that, but when I look back on it, I think I could see it. And so when I went in for my sentencing hearing, keep in mind, she had no idea that our business was in trouble. When I was indicted, the first thing she knew about what was happening is when it came out in the newspaper. I live in a relatively small town. I know everybody. Everybody knows me. We've been here for generations. It was, the embarrassment was off the chart. She had no idea until that happened. It was a bad, bad time. So I go in to get my sentence after months of this misery of dealing with everything. And I go in expecting a 2-year sentence. And because of all these rules, I was going to do basically 14 months and I was going to be home. That's what we've been told to expect. That's what I agreed to. I show up that day and he throws, the judge with his right, throws a book at me. I come outside to tell her, I didn't want her there. So I come outside to tell her what my sentence was. And in my mind, that was the death knell. She's going to say, that's too long. I can't wait. So I said to her at that moment, this is the time for you to tell me, this is the time for you to divorce me. It's too long. It's at the time, it seemed interminable. It seemed like there's no way we could come back from this. She looked me in the face and she said, I don't know what it's going to be like. I know it's going to be terrible. I hate you right now, frankly. But I committed to this family. I committed to you. And I don't care how long the sentence is, I'll be here.
Wow.
And that's an amazing thing. But it wasn't surprising to me because I knew the character of my wife. And so all of that time I was there, and then since I got out, she never once badmouthed me to my children, although she was very honest with them about my mistakes and about the things that they should try to avoid. We're very, very honest in our family, to the point of brutality, because dishonesty was essentially at the root of my crime. Her character is so special, and not just because she was born that way, but because she cultivates it. As I talked about, the way she prays, the way she thinks. I don't go 2 hours in a day when I don't get a text message or a phone call where she's thought of something that we should be doing better for our children, or someone we should go look out for. That's just the type of person she is. So she's cultivated this spirit of goodness, and that's why I call her a saint. It doesn't mean that she has not had a terrible time forgiving me for my dishonesty, for the wreckage that still is her life because of my mistakes. We still suffer because of those past mistakes. Business is very hard. It's hard to do a lot of things when you're a federal felon. There's a lot of things you can't do. You never get them out of your life. It's very difficult. There's still the embarrassment. We stayed in this town. She still has that feeling. Last night we went to a high school basketball game, and I know she still feels it even after all these years. But every day we work on our family and we do the best we can. But she's a special, special person. But with all of those wonderful things said about her, and all of how great and wonderful that sounds, and it does sound like a wonderful life I have here, it takes work every day.
Yeah.
It's every third day that we're sideways with each other, and we've got to work it out. I've said something last night. I had listened to something on a podcast. I'm real sensitive about COVID stuff. I get real angry because it kind of destroyed my business, and I feel angry by it. She's a registered nurse, so she falls on the other side just a little bit. She said something that just picked me off. And instead of being like I should have been, I just popped. It's totally ridiculous. We're standing there making dinner, and I act like a total jackass for about 5 minutes. And so that sort of thing still happens, and life is still a daily struggle. Yeah, well, I am more than some, I'll tell you that. But I'll say this to anybody that's trying to keep a marriage together, and maybe you can't save it, because not all marriages are savable, because it takes both people. It takes both people, and it takes every day. It takes humility. It takes personal goodness. Each of us has to be as good as we can. And I don't know that I'll ever get rich. I don't know that I'll ever have this perfect life. I'm not sure we'll ever totally reconcile, because once trust is broken, it cannot be completely recovered. It can't be. You just can't. You can build a relationship. You can love each other. You can even trust each other to some degree, but there will always be a hint of that old betrayal. However, because of our willingness to put the family first and to work together, number one, we're happier than if we were apart. We're very happy as a general rule. And two, our 4 children, I believe, have a proper outlook on the way their families should be. And in the end, that's my biggest role in life. I could die penniless, and seen as this terrible human being. But if my children go on to build something greater because of what they saw Elizabeth and I do, then we've probably succeeded. So
Awesome.
that's a long answer. Sorry, I was really worried
No,
that
I can relate to that, and I love that too. The only thing I'll say on the COVID thing, and don't tell this to your wife, she might not like it, but I don't say it's because of COVID. It's the government's response to COVID.
There you go. Thank you. That's the way to put it. Boy,
That's all I'm going to say about that. It's a terrible thing. It's a tragic thing, but the response to it is what caused a lot of businesses to go under, not the actual disease. But anyway, yeah, I want to talk about your pinned tweet, and that's a very good segue to that, because this is something that just, even when I read it, it'll put chills in me, man. Do you mind if I just read it to the viewers?
No, go ahead.
It says, my first day home from prison, my daughters asked me to brush their hair after the evening shower. I cried while I brushed their hair for an hour. Time has passed, and I've caught myself almost saying no at times. What foolishness. Savor every opportunity. And, as a man, as a dad who has a lot of kids, we got 3 18-month-olds right now. We have a 6.5-year-old. And I will admit that comes into my brain at times of, man, I just wish I had a day, I got my own. Yeah, right. Just some time, right? But when I read that, it reminds me of what is most important. And even when I hear you talk about, the thing that hurt you the most when you went away, it wasn't that the business went under, it wasn't the financial stuff, it was the time with your kids, with your family, right? And so can you kind of even elaborate more on that, and how you kind of now, everything's a gift with them, right? Like even the hard times, it's a gift. Like, and I remind myself of that. Even changing this poopy diaper the 12th time today, like, it's still a gift that I get to be their dad. Waking up with them at 2 a.m, it's a gift that I get to be their. They have nobody else in the world that's going to do that but me.
That's right. Well, you said it at the beginning. A get to attitude is a great way to be.
That's right.
That is a sensitive moment for me, and I hesitated to write that. And I wrote it a couple earlier on when I had a smaller audience, and some people responded, whatever. Then I kind of erased it because it was very personal. And when I wrote it this last time, a lot of people were interested in it. It struck home with a lot of people because we do get so frustrated with the daily grind. I call it domestic harmony. The domestic harmonies, which oftentimes don't sound like harmonies because they sound a lot more like work, doing the things you got to do. But really, it's those harmonies. It's the quiet moments when you tuck your daughter in bed at night. My 12-year-old is 12. She suffered because her dad was left when she was 2 years old, and she had some real separation anxiety. And so there's always a special moment with her, even now that she's becoming a teenager and kind of a pain in my neck, when I go spend a few minutes with her, talking to her in her room before she goes to bed at night. And it's those domestic harmonies are what real joy are made of. That particular experience coming home from prison was way weirder. That's not a word, but way weirder and more difficult than going in, which I didn't expect.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect somebody to say that either.
I was a mess when I went in. I'm epileptic, but pretty much under control, and it was out of control at the time. I didn't have a driver's license. I hadn't worked for a year because I was under indictment. I couldn't do anything. I was getting ready to leave my family 7 days before Christmas. I had to report to the prison 7 days before Christmas. I was a mess emotionally, but because of that, it was almost like I was a robot. I'm standing outside of this building in socks, sweatpants, and a t-shirt in 4 inches of snow because I couldn't take my shoes in, waiting to get processed. And that's kind of when it all began. But even that I just kind of did it, like almost like a robot. It was traumatic. It was demeaning. There were some bad experiences there. Coming home was totally different. It was so exciting. It was scary. So I had to go to a halfway house on the other side of the state before I could come home. I was there for 5 weeks. So I get on a bus to come across the state. It's about a 4 or 5 hour trip. My best friend picks me up at the gas station where the bus drops off and drives me through town, brings me home. I was scared to death to come in the front door. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
I took, for some reason, I didn't even think about it. I took my shoes off outside, and I opened the door, and I went in the house, and it felt like a holy place, and I didn't belong. And I think I wrote this the other day. I really did go down to my knees as my children and my family came towards me at the front door. Um, and I felt like I was out of place in this home that was holy, that my wife had made holy.
Mm.
And so that was a really weird day. My daughters wanted to show me their bedrooms and they'd painted and they had these new things. And my sons wanted me to, this and that. And everybody wanted me to listen to a song or watch this movie or what should we have for dinner? And they'd been building up all these things. And I felt like a spectator. It was a really weird feeling. I didn't feel like I expected to feel. For some reason, I was not part because I had come out of this other place that was an unclean, wicked, I guess you would say, dog eat dog type of a place. And I couldn't reconcile the place I had just left with the place I was standing at that moment. So for hours, I just took it all in and it was wonderful, but I didn't have the feeling I expected to have. My wife was a little standoffish because she wasn't sure how to feel either. They had visited a time or two, but it was a long ways away. It was 14 hours away where they sent me. A lot of money, difficult with young kids. So I only saw my kids twice during those years. That night, things kind of calmed down. The girls had their showers and they came down. Their hair was wet and they were in their robes. And they said, "Dad, will you brush our hair?" It sounds like such a non-event. And I don't know what it was. It was something about the wet hair and the smoothness of the brush going through it and the smell of the shower and the clean and these two perfectly pure children that still cared about me, that it's like that giant hard shell that had been around my heart all day as I didn't belong just cracked. And I brushed and brushed and brushed and brushed until finally they were like, "Well, we got to go to bed, Dad," But it's an emotional story because there was something about that experience. I can still feel the hair. I can still smell the shampoo. And I can feel the acceptance of my children at that moment. And like 3 nights ago, my 12-year-old says, "Hey, Dad, will you brush my hair?" She's in a hurry. "Hey, can you brush it? I got a knot here. We brush it out." And I'm like, "No, I don't know what I was doing, twiddling my thumbs." And then I thought, "You idiot. Of course I will." So it's an emotional story. It's a true story. It's something I'll never forget. It's visceral. It's something I can always hold on to. But surely we easily waste precious time.
Yeah,
I might be dead in the morning, Ty.
yeah, those little moments are always the best moments, right? Like when I think about my day and I journal often and reflect back on my day, or in the morning I usually do a gratitude journal and reflect on the day before and things. It's always those little moments, man. It's never the big family vacation that we planned for 6 months. This stuff's nice, but like it's always those little things, man. My daughter just wrestling her in the backyard and whispering in my ear, "I love you, Daddy."
Yeah.
Like that's
Oh,
something I'll never, like if I'm on my deathbed and I think of that, what a great life. Like
that's right.
it's those
I'm with you.
and what you kind of spoke to, it really reminds me a lot, Brad. And, I feel myself getting chills as you tell the story. Like it reminds me a lot of, when I found Christ in my life, to be honest, I felt very unworthy. I felt like, man, I've been addicted to these things that are dirty, they're unclean, that church people can't be a part of, that I can't come in your house, man, and one thing that I love about our church here, man, that, if you ever come visit Vegas, brother, I'm going to show you all around and whatnot.
Okay.
But we have an amazing church here that they do God Behind Bars. And it's a really awesome program. I've gotten to meet some of the people, and they always have them highlight a lot of their stories and stuff. And
Yeah.
many of them speak to that same thing, that they didn't feel worthy to even go home. They didn't feel worthy to come to church. And I think that's such a big takeaway, that we all struggle, whether it's in prison or a prison of your own mind or whatever that is, that your past. You're never too far gone, right? To take that first step back, to just pump the brakes and say, I can take one step back. And then, you know what? Grace is enough, and you're worthy. You deserve to be there, man. And that's such a powerful, awesome thing, man. I really appreciate you sharing.
It is a powerful thing, and it is a real thing. As you just expressed, it's a real feeling. It's a real event. It's a real thing, and I can go back to it and remember, because we aren't worthy sometimes. Sometimes we make the mistakes and whatever else. But you go back to it, and yeah, that's beautifully said.
Can I ask one question too? Because you mentioned your first year in prison, you you kind of blamed everybody else, right? You're angry at the judge, angry at the partners, angry. Have you come to terms with all that? Did you kind of work through a lot of that?
I did. It all kind of happened at that same time when I started to get straight with myself. I started to get my mind turned around. It's almost like I was like, in my mind, I was like, they've taken all these years from me. That's how I thought about it. All this time from me. I am not allowing them to take any more. I'm not going to waste 1 minute planning revenge on this person that wouldn't even remember
hurting them. Yeah, it's not hurting them, it's just hurting you, right?
Right. And so that was a real revelation to finally walk away from this angst that I had built up on the inside. And that was part of accepting my own guilt, and making those basic changes. I don't think I could have made the changes and the self-honesty I talked about earlier without getting rid of those excuses and getting rid of those feelings of hatred towards people who did behave poorly. They could have been lenient. They could have done it differently. They did, there was lies, there was dishonesty. All the things I was mad about were real, plus some things that weren't, that I had conjured up in my mind. But as long as I held on to, they did this to me, I couldn't heal. The wound just festered and festered and festered. And so there was high value in saying, I don't even care. I don't even think about it. I don't even remember. In fact, I see some of those people on a pretty regular basis. Some I've fully reconciled with out of wanting to. I made an effort to go and say, whatever. And some have been unwilling and whatever. But I'm free of that. I'm totally free of that, because why would I do it? I lost all those months, all that time. I used to count the hours that I'd been away from my children. I used to write down the number of basketball games, the number of baseball games, the number of I used to write it down. It was agony. Why would I let them take away from me the time I have left with those feelings? So holding a grudge, which I come from an Italian family. We hold grudges. My dad and his mother fought like you can't imagine. I mean, I swear they hated each other. So my dad died before his mother did, because he died young. When grandma finally died, I can remember thinking, I want to be there, because I don't know if they're going to be able to put let's say they're in heaven. Let's say heaven's like we think it is or whatever, and they're there. I think they might still hold a grudge. I think they might hold on to those old grudges. So we hold grudges as a it's kind of how we are, but it's a waste. It's a waste.
Yeah, you feel that come off, man, because I blamed everybody else, but for my divorce and some things I went through, I blamed everybody else. You blame your parents, or if they had just done this, or you blame your ex, they had just done, and then what happened for me, at least, I took ownership of everything, and then even said, these things that aren't my fault, I'm going to tell myself they're my fault, just because it's freeing, I'm going to take ownership of everything. I'm going to forgive everybody I need to forgive and move on. One of the first mentors, that I ever had kind of spoke on that, where had some pretty bad things happen to him in his childhood. And, the day he said that he forgave people that did that to him was the day that he felt like he started his new life, that he was free. He didn't feel weighed down by that anymore. It's a powerful takeaway.
And I'm sure it's nearly impossible for some people. I had a wonderful childhood. I never suffered abuse or neglect or anything like that. I have 2 or 3 people that I'm fairly close to that have suffered sexual abuse as children from people that should have obviously taken care of them. And I don't know how you would get to the point of forgiving. That seems really hard, but I've watched some of them get past it and do, as you say, slough it off and forgive and move on. And some, it's still, after all these years, it still is the deciding factor in everything that happens in their life. It's still molding everything that happens. And so I did a little spaces the other night. I don't know how to do them. I thought everybody's doing them. I thought, well, hell, I'll just get on here and talk. So I did. Talked about pain. And one of the things I talked about was facing pain. And then I wrote a tweet about it, about how if you look deep enough into the pain, generally down in the deep, darkest hole, that's where you find the best parts of yourself. Because you go, man, I did it. I made it through. But the problem is we never want to look that close at the pain. We want to kind of avoid it. And you can't heal. You cannot heal if the wound is still festering because you're holding a grudge, whatever, or you're ignoring it, or you're turning away from it, or whatever. You have to just face it. But man, holding a grudge and and feeling vengeful, it's just poisonous to your own soul.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't hurt that other person at all. That's really
Heck
well
no,
said.
they don't. What do they care? Most of them don't even
Yeah.
remember my name.
That's right. But yeah, life keeps marching on. That's one book I read to my daughter it was about a month ago now, but it was about Gandhi and how he got imprisoned for many years and falsely he shouldn't have, right? They imprisoned him wrongly, and the guards that were tasked with beating him daily, literally he ended up turning some of them into kind of believers and to have faith because they literally would say, you know what, this guy's in prison, yet his mind is free and he's the happiest guy I've ever met. I'm out here tasked with beating him and I'm miserable. And he actually turned them around just by kind of just shows that the power of the mind. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you dealt with that quite a bit when you were in prison, but if you kind of told yourself that story, man, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible, as maybe you did that first year. But then as soon as you kind of switch that mindset around to, you know what, like I'm gonna just do the best that I can here every day and grow through it. I mean that's where the magic happens, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. The magic happens when you determine what your purpose is for living and how you're going to go about it every day. So in that case, Gandhi's purpose was to maintain his mental power over himself. So they couldn't take it away. Viktor Frankl talks about it in Man's Search
Yeah.
for Meaning. It's the most influential book that I've ever read from the standpoint of how to handle crisis and trauma. He basically said they could take everything. They killed his family. They took his freedom. They starved him. They beat him, whatever. They could not take the place inside of his mind. They couldn't take it away if he didn't want to give it to him. And I found that once I developed a mindset like that, where my purpose is to get healthier, get ready to come out on the other side, study, whatever, all these things I can do to be better. So that when I get home, I can hit the ground running and I can be 1,000 times better person than I was when I left all those years ago. That gave me purpose, so that even though my day was mostly full of mundane BS,
Mm.
at the end of the day, I said I ticked off the things. I exercised and I ate as good as I could, and I wrote in my journal and I read the Bible, and I ticked off the things that I was hoping were pushing me towards my purpose. And at the end of the day, I would think to myself, I was pretty accomplished today. I wasn't from the
Yeah.
standpoint of the real world, but I felt accomplished. So if
Yeah.
you have purpose, which should always be just, live a better life, whatever, be a better father, whatever your purpose is, and you really focus on that, and then you get your daily activities in line with that purpose, you can almost always end a day with positivity and happiness and joy. But it's all in here,
Yep.
it's all
Yeah.
it's all a mindset.
Yeah, our thoughts control our future, man. That's for sure. So
They
you
do.
work on that. And again, that's why it's important to take some quiet time every day and work on those thoughts and control those.
Totally.
Well, I don't want to take a ton of your time, Brad, and I appreciate you coming on, man. I always end every podcast with what I call the top 5 rapid fire questions. So I'm gonna fire off
Okay.
5 quick questions for you, man. Just give me first thing that comes to the top of your mind. Is that cool?
I'll do my best.
All right, man. You might have already just answered this. What's the best book or most impactful book you've ever read?
Well, the Bible obviously is life changing because of the understanding of the concept of Christ and what he did. And so that's a lifetime thing. But Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is life altering for me, especially if we're talking about my incarceration and my recovery from that time. That book changed everything.
Yeah, that's one I feel like everybody should read. It should be required reading in high school. It's such a great book. Yeah,
yep. I read it every year. I have a list of books I read every year, and that's on it.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. What does a perfect day look like for you now that you're outside? Now that you're back with family, what could you run us through sort of a perfect day for yourself?
Sure. You wrote that question on the outline, and so I thought about it. I appreciate you giving me a heads up there, because really, I don't have a lot of hobbies. I don't play much golf, whatever else. I fly fish. Me and my son, we love to fly fish and whatever. But we've got a family cabin in a place called Island Park, which is on the Snake River, on the Henry's Fork of the Snake River. And the perfect day for me is early summer, up at the cabin. You smell the pine trees, get up early, and we go out and do some trout fishing in the stream and come back and spend the day with the kids, and we go on a hike and roast marshmallows around the fire at night. And then we sit out front in the evening, and for whatever reason, there was an old thing of my grandpa, we shell peanuts and sit there and just chew the fat for hours and fall asleep late and then get up and do it again. So If I had my druthers every day, that's what I'd spend the rest of my life doing, is sitting on the porch of the cabin, fishing in the morning, and spend the rest of the day with my kids. So that's the perfect day. But I will say a caveat to that. I'm really happy when I get up in the morning. I go do a couple of jobs. I do a pretty good job. I collect a few bucks. I pay my bills. I come home, watch a little television, put my girls to bed, and go to bed at night. I'm pretty damn happy.
Yeah, it's the little things, man. It really is, you know. I love
But I
that.
would be happy to stay at the cabin because it's the best.
Sounds pretty nice, man. What's the best way to silence fear that you would say, or to move past it? Because I imagine as you're walking into a prison or something that's very unknown, right? A lot of fear goes into that. What was the best way that you found was to turn that fear off?
Face it.
Face it head
You
on.
have to face it. Yeah. So early on in my stay, people want to see how tough you are. They want to see if they can take advantage of you, because everybody's got an angle, because everybody's suffering, and you got a lot of hustlers in there. You got a lot of troublemakers in there. And so I had some things stolen from me, like my second day, which was a big deal because my family had no money to send me. All I had was the prison issue stuff. You could buy stuff out of the commissary to make yourself a little more comfortable, but all I had was what they gave me, and somebody stole it to see what I would do. I didn't know what to do. You know, I was a middle-aged white guy who'd been in a few, I grew up fighting a little bit. I was a tough guy, played football, whatever, but I was out of shape. I was scared to death. So there was a guy that lived in the cell across the hall from me. We called him Johnny Rotten. He'd been in prison for years and years and years. Tough old bird, 60 years old, super fit, toughest son of a gun I've ever met. He said to me, "Well, what are you gonna do about it?" Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. And so he says, "I can tell you who did it, and I'll tell you what to do about it." And of course, what to do about it was go to this guy who I was afraid of and confront him and say, "Give me my stuff back, or else I'm going to get you, whatever." So I remember thinking, I can't do it. I did. I went to this fellow and I said to him, "Damn it, I need that stuff. My family's poor. That's all I've got in the world. We're talking about underwear and a toothbrush here. We're not talking about like a diamond chain.
Yeah.
Give me my freaking underwear back and my toothbrush." He says, "Well, what are you going to do otherwise?" I said, "Well, I guess we're going to fight because I got to have it." It had to have been comical. And in the end, he hands my stuff back to me and we became pretty good friends. It's a funny story, but it was so scary at the time.
Sure.
Face your fear, man. If you're afraid of something, if you have a call you have to make to someone who's trying to collect money from you and you're afraid to death, call them first thing in the morning, because by noon you're losing your mind with stress.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If you got to if you have something that's you're afraid of that's dominating your life, and we've all got them, they make you sick inside, you get butterflies, you got to go straight on.
Yep. You got to do the thing. That's right, man. In the military, they call it eat the frog, right? You do the hardest thing, eat the frog. It's the hardest thing you're going to do all day. You do that first. You wake up and you do it, because otherwise it takes up all that mental space, man. Causes that anxiety.
And it's never as bad as you think.
That's right. Yeah, that's very true, man. Once you do it, the fear is usually worse than the actual doing, right?
Almost always. Even if Sonic had turned and beat me down, let's say he had turned and beat me up. Okay, but maybe I earned a little bit of respect, and what's a few bumps and bruises,
Right.
Now, granted, I'm on this side of it, so it's easy for me to say that, but usually the anxiety about doing the thing is bigger. I posted a picture a while back of this huge big bad wolf, and then this little Red Riding Hood just standing nose to nose with the big red wolf, basically saying, "What do you got for me?" Because
I always say that to myself. Yeah, like you should look that thing in the eye and say, "You know what? You're standing here. I'm standing here too, and I ain't going anywhere until I get what I said how to do." Whether that's the degree, the promotion, the getting in shape, whatever that is, man. When those voices come in, sometimes you got to yell back at them.
But you know what? You might get eaten.
Yeah, for sure.
You might get sued. You might lose your court case. You might get divorced. You might end up in prison. It's still better to face the thing head on and deal with it than deal with the unknown and the anxiety and the worry. It's unbearable. So
I agree with you.
I say the best way to handle fear is to go straight at it.
I love that, man. Thank you. Well, what's future plans, man? What can we see you look forward to you doing next, or what do you got in the downpipe for us, man?
Well, my life's not very exciting. I got to go out right now. It's 12 degrees, and I got to go cut a couple of windshields out of a couple of vans, and that's going to suck really bad for the next couple of hours. But my goal when I started my Twitter account I didn't really have a direction. It was just to kind of write whatever I felt like. But from the response I'm getting from everybody, I feel like there's a real opportunity to offer hope. And I don't know if coaching is the right word. I've never liked the word life coaching because it's always felt kind of scammy to me. But I do feel like there's a huge need for guidance, maybe a writing program. So I've got a few things in the works. I've got like 3 different books I've half written. Um, George Cisneros, George is on Twitter.
Love George. He's a future past guest on the
one
podcast.
of my favorite guys. So he gave me some advice on writing the book and kind of get started that way. And so I'm working on that. My goal eventually is to have a large enough following that I can make a living coaching, talking, speaking, writing, that sort of thing. So, I haven't made any effort to monetize anything on Twitter yet. I'm just doing it to do it right now and building a following. But eventually I would like to do that because I do have something to offer. The story of my experiences are real stories and they can help. And in the direct messages I get on Twitter all the time, and I always respond and we discuss back and forth, I have been able to be helpful to people. And so I expect to do that more and more. It's hard because I'm grinding 10 hours a day with my body. I'm out working every day, but I hope to do a little bit less grinding, a little bit more talking.
I love that, man. Yeah, I think, like the coaching and things around that, I always thought it was a scam too, but then I hired my first coach and I realized this is 100x my life. So it's not a scam, but all they're really doing is, and probably all you're doing in the DMs is helping these guys ask themselves the right questions and helping them get out of their own way. It's a lot of what this comes down to, because when you can zoom out and take that aerial view, when we're grinding 10 hours a day, man, when we're right in the thick of it, it's very hard for us to zoom out and see some of these other things that a person can come in with your knowledge, your experience, your life, and you can kind of take this overhead view and say, hey, here's how we get out of your own way. So I think you'll add a lot of value in that way, man.
And let me say one more thing, and this might get me in some trouble, but I was supposed to go to a trauma counselor when I got out, because I was whatever, you have PTSD. They tell you all the things you have and take medication and whatever, which I don't. My experience with counselors and with the mental health industry in general was so bad. It's like there's nothing there. So when I discuss with people their own trauma and the challenges that they're having, and they've been to 9 different counselors, and the counselors want to identify what's wrong with them, blame somebody for it, and then give them medication. I mean, that's the shittiest way to handle anything in the world. And so there is a real space for people like you, people like me, people like George that have real life experiences to walk people through their own recovery. And I'm not saying I know how to help someone who's suicidal. I'm sure there's shrinks and whatever else. But my experience in the mental health field is that they do a terrible job of really helping you heal. Great job of identifying what's wrong with you and blaming somebody for it and trying to medicate you out of it, but a very bad job of finding the root and pulling it out. So anyway.
Medication, I think, should be the last way we go, right? Yeah. It should always be lifestyle first. And then, of course, medication is needed sometimes, but often that can be avoided if you change lifestyle stuff, right? Like I was medicated for anxiety. All I've really changed is that now I wake up with a purpose, I journal, I work out, and I change my diet, and voila, like my anxiety literally went down from 100% to like 1%, just lifestyle. So lifestyle. I agree with you there, man. Well, Brad, I really appreciate you coming on, man, telling your story. I'd love to get you on again. Maybe when you start your coaching business, we can have you on again, man. And
I'd love to do it.
And I'll link everything Brad does down below. If you guys want to get in touch with him, man, find him. He is at aged_survivor on Twitter. Growing a huge following over there, man. I love to see you grow. I love to see your message get out. I know it resonates to a lot of people and you help a lot of people, but I just appreciate it by my heart, man, you coming on and sharing what you shared today. Thank you, man.
Thanks for the invite and for the great conversation. It was cathartic for me and enjoyable and kept me in the warmth for a few hours. So I appreciate it.
Hey, man, now you get to go out there. You don't have to. You get to go out there and make some money for your family, doing some windshields, helping some other people. It's all a gift, brother. Just go get it, man.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege.
It's a privilege, brother. Thank you guys for tuning in, man. This has been Tyromper's No Limit Podcast, episode number 20. We got Brad, the Age Survivor, on here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Give us a like and a subscribe. That helps the channel a lot. And above that, man, you guys go have the greatest day of your life. Go bless somebody. Be kind, especially to yourself. Have the greatest day, guys. Thanks.